Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is John, and today we are talking about Clint Eastwood's secret blacklist of actors. In this video, we will explore how one of Hollywood's most respected legends built a reputation not just on talent, but on discipline, precision, and an almost unforgiving respect for time. In the world of Hollywood, where fame often overshadows discipline, Clint Eastwood stands as something different, not just an actor, not just a director, but a man who turned filmmaking into a system of absolute efficiency. For more than 6 decades, Eastwood has been known for one defining trait: he does not waste time. On his sets, there are no unnecessary delays, no chaotic improvisations, and no tolerance for unprofessional behavior. Everything is planned, precise, and executed with almost military discipline. Crew members who have worked with him often describe the same experience: early morning call times, quiet sets, minimal retakes, and a sense that every single second on set matters. To Clint Eastwood, filmmaking is not chaos. It is coordination. It is respect. Respect for the crew, respect for the schedule, and most importantly, respect for the craft itself. But behind this disciplined system lies something that Hollywood quietly whispers about: a hidden list, not an official document, not publicly acknowledged, but widely discussed among insiders. A list of actors who, for one reason or another, crossed a line with Clint Eastwood. Not because they lacked talent, but because they failed to respect his most important rule: professionalism above everything else. Over the years, Eastwood has worked with some of the biggest names in cinema: legends, Oscar winners, rising stars. But not all of them adapted to his way of working. Some arrived late. Some demanded excessive takes, some brought emotional instability onto set, and some simply believed that their artistic process mattered more than the production itself. To Clint Eastwood, that mindset is unacceptable, because on a film set, hundreds of people depend on one another: camera operators, lighting teams, sound engineers, assistants, production designers, all working in perfect synchronization. When one person breaks that rhythm, the entire system collapses, and Eastwood never allowed that collapse to happen twice. This philosophy is what made him one of the most efficient directors in Hollywood history. Films completed on time, budgets controlled, performances captured with minimal waste. But it also created tension, because not every actor shares the same philosophy. Some actors see filmmaking as a slow, emotional process, something that requires repeated takes, personal rituals, and extended preparation. Eastwood sees it differently. He believes the first instinct is often the most honest one, that overthinking destroys authenticity, and that preparation should happen before the camera rolls, not during production. This clash of philosophies has led to some of the most talked about behind-the-scenes conflicts in Hollywood history. And today, we are going to explore those moments, not as gossip, but as lessons in discipline, ego, and the reality of working in one of the most demanding industries in the world. Because in Clint Eastwood's world, talent alone is never enough. You can be brilliant, you can be famous, you can even be a legend, but if you cannot respect time, you cannot stay on his set. And that principle has shaped not only his career, but also the fate of many actors who underestimated it. Now, to understand how strict this system really is, we need to look deeper into Eastwood's working style. On most Hollywood productions, delays are expected. Scenes are repeated multiple times. Adjustments are constant. Actors are given freedom to explore their performance in multiple ways. But on Eastwood's sets, the approach is different. Scenes are prepared in advance. Rehearsals are short and focused. And once the camera starts rolling, there is an expectation that everyone is ready. No confusion, no hesitation, no unnecessary delay. This system creates something rare in Hollywood: momentum, a steady flow where production moves forward without interruption. But it also means there is no patience for disruption, and this is where problems begin, because not everyone can adapt to this pace. Some actors struggle with it, some resist it, and some challenge it directly, believing that their method deserves exception. But Clint Eastwood has never been a director who makes exceptions easily. He treats every crew member equally. From lighting assistants to lead actors, everyone is expected to follow the same discipline. And when that discipline is broken, consequences follow, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Over time, this created a reputation around Eastwood's productions, a reputation that working with him is both an honor and a test. Because you are not just being hired for your talent. You are being evaluated on your behavior, your punctuality, and your respect for the entire production machine. And those who fail that test rarely get a second chance. Clint Eastwood's reputation in Hollywood didn't come from loud arguments or public drama. It came from something far more powerful: silence, discipline, and absolute control over his environment. On his sets, everything runs on a simple principle: the machine must keep moving. There is no space for ego-driven delays, no tolerance for repeated mistakes, and no patience for behavior that slows down an entire crew. Over the years, this created a natural filter. Actors who respected the system thrived. Those who didn't slowly disappeared from his working circle. It wasn't personal, it was practical. Because in Eastwood's world, a film set is not a stage for self-expression alone. It is a coordinated production involving dozens, sometimes hundreds, of professionals. Every delay affects lighting schedules, camera setups, location permits, and entire production budgets. And Eastwood understood something many filmmakers ignore: time is the most expensive currency in filmmaking. So when someone wastes it, the impact is massive. Crew members who worked with him often described the atmosphere as unusually calm, but extremely focused. No shouting, no chaos, just quiet expectation. Everyone knows their role, everyone knows the schedule, and everyone knows that failure to deliver affects the entire system. This is why Eastwood developed what people later began calling his unspoken blacklist. Not a literal list kept on paper, but a pattern of decisions. If an actor repeatedly disrupted the flow of production, they simply weren't called again. No confrontation, no public statement, just a quiet professional separation. And this approach made him both respected and feared in equal measure. But what makes this even more interesting is how different types of actors reacted to his system. Some adapted immediately. They understood that his environment rewarded preparation, discipline, and instinct. Others struggled deeply because they were used to multiple takes, emotional delays, and personal routines before performance. Eastwood never tried to change them. He simply observed, and then adjusted accordingly. Because in his philosophy, filmmaking is not about forcing people to change. It is about finding the right people for the system. Over time, this created a very specific pattern in his career. The actors who worked with him successfully often described the experience as liberating: less confusion, less overthinking, more trust in instinct. But those who couldn't adapt often left with frustration, believing they weren't given enough creative space. And that tension is what built the legendary reputation around Eastwood's working style, a style that values one thing above all else: execution over explanation. As Clint Eastwood's career moved forward, the industry began to understand something very clearly. Working with him was not difficult because of ego. It was difficult because of expectations. He didn't demand perfection in a dramatic way. He demanded readiness. And that difference changed everything. Some actors who entered his world expecting flexibility quickly realized the reality. Eastwood's sets were built on timing, precision, and mutual respect. If a scene was scheduled for a specific hour, the entire production was arranged around that moment. Lighting crews prepared for natural conditions. Camera teams adjusted angles. Sound departments synchronized equipment. Dozens of professionals waited for one signal, and when that signal came, everything had to be ready. No delays, no excuses, no extended preparation on set. This is where conflicts naturally began to appear over the years. Some actors came from training backgrounds where emotional preparation was essential before every take. They needed time, space, repetition, internal alignment. Eastwood, however, believed that too much preparation during shooting destroyed authenticity. He often trusted instinct more than analysis. So when actors slowed down the rhythm of production, tension quietly built up. Not loudly, not publicly, but steadily. Crew members would notice it first: the slight pause in scheduling, the adjustment of lighting windows, the quiet frustration of assistants trying to keep everything aligned. And Eastwood would respond in his usual way. He would simply adapt the schedule once and observe. If the pattern repeated, adjustments followed. This approach led to a quiet reputation across Hollywood, not of anger, but of finality. Because once someone disrupted his system too often, they rarely returned. No dramatic firing, no confrontation-heavy breakdown, just a silent professional distance that everyone in the industry understood. And over time, this became known informally as his blacklist culture. Not written, not spoken, but very real in effect. Directors and producers learned that Eastwood protected one thing above all else: the rhythm of filmmaking. To him, a film set was like a living organism. If one part stops functioning, the entire system suffers. So discipline wasn't optional, it was survival. And that belief shaped how he viewed every collaboration. Either you match the pace, or you didn't stay in it. What made Eastwood even more distinct was his emotional detachment during these moments. Where other directors might argue or negotiate, he simply observed and made decisions. No long debates, no emotional escalation, just clarity. And clarity is what made his sets so efficient and so unforgiving. By this stage in his career, Hollywood had already adapted to his reputation. Agents warned actors beforehand, studios prepared talent accordingly, and those who worked with him understood one simple truth: you don't test Clint Eastwood's patience with time, because once that boundary is crossed, the relationship rarely recovers. By the time the Eastwood blacklist stories reached their final chapter, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. Every incident, no matter how different on the surface, pointed toward the same core principle. Professionalism was not negotiable in Clint Eastwood's world. But what made this final story stand out was not just the behavior of the actors involved. It was what those moments revealed about the changing nature of Hollywood itself, a place where art, ego, discipline, and personal expression were constantly colliding. Eastwood had built his entire career on a simple philosophy: keep it efficient, keep it honest, and most importantly, don't waste the time of the people standing behind the camera. To him, filmmaking wasn't a stage for personal indulgence. It was a coordinated effort involving dozens, sometimes hundreds, of professionals who all depended on each other. And that belief is exactly what brought him into conflict with a new generation of performers and creators who approached acting very differently. The clash with Leonardo DiCaprio on J. Edgar became one of the clearest examples of this generational divide. DiCaprio represented a modern style of acting, deeply analytical, emotionally layered, and built on repetition. For him, every scene was a process of exploration. One take was never enough. He would push for variations, adjustments, and emotional recalibration until he felt every possible angle had been examined. Eastwood, on the other hand, believed that too much repetition stripped away authenticity. The first instinct, the first emotional reaction, that was where truth lived. After that, everything started to feel constructed. So when DiCaprio asked for additional takes, Eastwood didn't argue. He simply waited, watched, observed, and quietly adjusted his expectations. But internally, it reinforced something he already believed: that overthinking could kill the natural energy of a scene. There was a moment during filming when DiCaprio delivered a performance so raw and immediate that even the crew felt the shift in the room. It was perfect on the first attempt, but then came another request for another take, and then another. Eastwood stepped away from the monitor. He didn't shout, he didn't interrupt. He simply walked to the side, drank his coffee, and let the process continue without him. That silence said everything. To Eastwood, filmmaking was about trust. Trust your instincts, trust your preparation, trust your team. But once trust turned into hesitation, repetition, or overanalysis, the system started to break down. And that belief didn't only apply to DiCaprio, it applied to everyone he had worked with who, in his eyes, crossed the invisible line between dedication and overcomplication. He respected talent deeply, but only when it came with discipline. That's why even the most celebrated names in Hollywood found themselves outside his comfort zone if their working style clashed with his rhythm. Not because he disliked them personally, but because he believed the process itself was sacred. And once that process was disrupted, no amount of fame could fix it. What makes Eastwood's reputation so unusual in Hollywood isn't just his success, it's the consistency of his approach over decades. While the industry evolved, while filmmaking became more complex and layered, his methods stayed almost unchanged. Short takes, clear direction, minimal disruption, maximum focus. To some, it felt old-fashioned. To others, it felt like discipline in its purest form. But to everyone who worked with him, one thing was always clear: On a Clint Eastwood set, time didn't bend for anyone. And that brings us to the final reflection, not just about Eastwood, but about what these stories ultimately mean in a larger sense. Because beyond the headlines, beyond the blacklist narratives and Hollywood drama, there is a deeper question hiding underneath. In a world where creativity is often linked with freedom, how much structure is too much? And at what point does artistic expression become self-indulgence? Eastwood's answer has never changed. Freedom is important, but responsibility comes first. As the years went on, Clint Eastwood's reputation didn't soften, it solidified. In an industry where trends constantly shift, where new acting styles rise and fall, his approach remained almost untouched, and that consistency became both his strength and his defining identity. To outsiders it might look strict, even cold, but to the people who actually worked on his sets, it was something else entirely. Clarity. Everyone knew the rules, everyone understood the expectations, and because of that, there was no confusion, no chaos, and no wasted time. In a world where large productions can easily collapse under delays and ego clashes, Eastwood's sets moved like clockwork. That didn't mean he ignored emotion or creativity. It meant he believed creativity works best inside structure, not outside of it. Looking back at the actors who clashed with him, a pattern becomes impossible to miss. Each conflict was different on the surface: alcohol, emotional instability, method acting, overanalysis, artistic ego. But underneath it all, the issue was the same: a difference in philosophy. Some saw acting as exploration without limits. Eastwood saw it as execution with purpose. Some believed repetition brought depth. He believed repetition diluted truth. Some needed time to become the character. He believed you show up already ready. And when those worlds collided, there was only one possible outcome: separation. Not anger, not drama, just distance. But perhaps the most interesting part of these stories is not who was removed, but who stayed. Actors like Gene Hackman, Meryl Streep, and Hilary Swank didn't just survive Eastwood's method, they thrived in it. They understood the rhythm, they adapted to the pace. And in return, they delivered performances that became career-defining. Hilary Swank once described the experience as unexpectedly freeing. Not because she had more time, but because she had less hesitation. There was no room for doubt, no space for endless repetition, just instinct, trust, and execution. And that is the paradox of Eastwood's system. What looks restrictive from the outside often feels liberating from within. Over time, Hollywood began to recognize something important. Eastwood wasn't rejecting talent. He was filtering for compatibility. His world didn't demand perfect actors. It demanded prepared ones. It didn't reward overthinking. It rewarded presence. And that's why his films continued to succeed across decades, because the system behind them was stable, focused, and relentlessly efficient. In the end, the so-called blacklist isn't really a list at all. It's a reflection, a mirror showing what happens when two very different definitions of art collide. One side says, take your time, explore everything, push until it feels complete. The other says, trust the moment, commit fully, and move forward. Neither is completely wrong, but in Clint Eastwood's world, only one of them fits. And maybe that's why his legacy feels so distinct today. Not because he shouted the loudest, not because he controlled everything, but because he understood something many forget. A film set is not just about individual expression, it is about collective discipline. Hundreds of people, one goal, limited time, and every second matters. So when people talk about Clint Eastwood's secret blacklist, they are really talking about something much bigger. They are talking about standards, they are talking about respect, and they are talking about the simple idea that talent alone is never enough, if it comes at the cost of everyone else's time. In a career spanning more than 6 decades, Clint Eastwood never changed that belief. And because of that, his films were not just made, they were finished on time, with purpose, and with a clarity that is rare in modern filmmaking.